Welcome back. A delegation headed by Israel's spy chief is scheduled to visit Washington later this week. The Israeli intelligence team, the head of the Mossad, is expected to warn the Trump administration about a dangerous scenario that could play out in Syria. Our senior defense correspondent Shai Ben-Ari explains.
A delegation of Israeli defense officials will be heading to Washington later this week for talks on sensitive issues, according to reports in both Israeli and American media. The Israeli team will be led by Mossad chief Yossi Cohen and will also include the head of military intelligence, Major General Herzl Halevi, according to Israeli daily Haaretz. They are set to meet with National Security Advisor RJ McMaster, his deputy Dina Power, and Special Envoy Jason Greenblatt, among others. The meetings were reportedly arranged by Greenblatt and Jared Kushner, President Trump's senior advisor and son-in-law. The discussion with McMaster comes with the National Security Advisor currently under fire in the media from some hardliners in the pro-Israel community who feel he is not pro-Israel enough. The meetings aren't expected to focus on peace efforts, but rather Israel's security concerns relating to Syria and Lebanon. These images taken by an Israeli satellite were released by ImageSat International Tuesday. The company says they show a missile base being built near the city of Banyas in northern Syria. Experts who have examined the images note similarities between the facility and missile bases built in Iran. With Islamic State now on the back foot, the Assad regime and its allies are making gains in eastern Syria. Israel is particularly worried about Iran-backed Shiite militias possibly filling the vacuum left by Islamic State.
Islamic State departs, Iran enters. Simple. We're talking mainly about Syria. Our policy is clear. We strongly oppose the military buildup of Iran and its satellites, primarily Hezbollah in Syria, and we will do everything necessary to preserve Israel's security.
The Jewish state is known to be dissatisfied with recent understandings reached by the U.S. and Russia over de-escalation zones in different parts of Syria. Israeli leaders feel these agreements don't offer enough guarantees to keep Iran's influence at bay and away from Israel's borders. But there are also no guarantees any meetings will change the state of affairs. Shai Ben-Ari, I-24 News.
All right, let's now go to Yoav Borovitz, our correspondent at our Tel Aviv headquarters. Yoav, good to have you with us. And Yoav, the Israeli delegation that's coming to Washington, D.C., are there expectations that they will also meet with President Trump on these security concerns, or just with the U.S. security officials?
Well, the delegation is expected to meet U.S. National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster, Deputy National Security Advisor Dina Power, Special Representative to the Israeli-Palestinian negotiations Mr. Jason Greenblatt, and other senior Trump administration officials. But the Israeli delegation, Michelle, does not have a planned meeting with President Trump.
In terms of the Israeli government, Yoav, do they expect any action to come from these meetings, or is it just more to bring up these issues as concerns for discussion?
The main focus for these talks is a ceasefire agreement in southern Syria brokered by President Trump and Russia President Putin, and Israel's concerns over Iranian influence in Syria. The Israeli intelligence is very concentrated and invested in this fragile arrangement and might have valuable information that might very much be of American interests, Michelle.
All right, Yoav, appreciated. Yoav Borovitz live for us in Tel Aviv. Let's now bring in Matthew Brodsky. He's a senior fellow at the Security Studies Group in Washington. Matthew, thanks for being with us. And Matthew, concern that Iran is filling the vacuum left by Islamic State. So the question is, if Iran doesn't fill in that void, who else is likely to fill that vacuum?
Well, it's Iran, Syria, Assad is the same thing. Hezbollah is the same thing as Iran. So basically, if you're not going to have the United States or forces that are loyal, whether they're Sunni Arab militias that the United States is working with, or in the northern part with the Kurds and the SDF, then that's really the choice. And obviously, that's a problem for Israel. Should be a problem for the United States as well.
So, Matthew, the U.S. has been fighting ISIS. The U.S. has also been helping Lebanon, which is inextricably linked to Hezbollah now. So, in a way, the U.S. is in fact helping Iran, correct?
Yeah, that's actually one of the more disturbing aspects of the policy. And I know from having met with the senior administration officials recently that they tend to view the LAF in Lebanon as, the way they put it is that they exist ideologically on a spectrum and that not all parts of the LAF are aligned with Hezbollah. And that they think that they can pick which sides and which units they can work with. But of course, now they've stepped up the amount of equipment that they're giving, the training that they have, and the LAF is working hand in hand with Hezbollah against ISIS. So it's really, from my perspective, a very big problem that the United States is supporting the LAF, and it's just another area that shows that the Trump administration, while it's given thought to the plan to defeat ISIS, really has a lot of thinking to do when it comes to pushing back against Iran.
All right, so Matthew, what should the U.S. do? What should be the strategy with regards to Iran and ISIS?
Well, to begin with, it's really important that if the goals are, again, to push back against Iran and defeat ISIS, that you have to make sure that you can accomplish one without strengthening the other. Right. So it would not make sense to have the policy go one after the other. That would be for starters. Number two, the NSC is going through a overall review of America's Iran policy, which also includes the policy toward the Iran deal, the nuclear deal, and that is going to come up again in October. And what the United States does with the nuclear deal, and then how they're going to decide to react to Iran afterwards, if they keep the deal, there are several options that they could pursue. But they need to be prepared, and they need to have the State Department functioning and carrying out what the president wants in order to get allies ready, no matter what situation or what choice the administration decides to make. And that has currently been a problem because the administration has not all been operating off the same script.
Well, Matthew, obviously Israel is very concerned about these developments and is sending a delegation to D.C. to discuss, amongst other things, that ceasefire agreement in Syria between the U.S. and Russia. What is Israel's main concern with the agreement, and what would Israel want changed?
Well, I think from Israel's perspective, when they hear President Trump say in a press conference or delivering a statement a couple of weeks ago where he says, you know, if the United States keeps making small ceasefire agreements here and there, then suddenly there'll be no fighting and no one dying in Syria. That makes sense kind of as a catchphrase, but in reality, that's putting together a bunch of tactics in place of a strategy. So I think Israel will be most interested in hearing what is the plan when it comes to Iran. That has to be handled. It can't just be a bunch of tactics here and there, and then, oh, in Lebanon, the United States is still going to be supporting indirectly a group that's directly a group that's very much working with Hezbollah and a government that is under the thumb of Hezbollah. So Israel is going to want to see what that strategy is, and for many reasons, the Trump administration has just not been able to do so to this point.
And meanwhile, Matthew, speaking of Iran and the nuclear deal, Iran saying that it could pull out within an hour's notice, and worse, could restart its nuclear program to an even more advanced level than before the negotiations, also within a matter of hours. How concerning is that?
Well, that completely depends. Article coming out this week that discusses 4 options on what can be done with the nuclear arrangement if one wanted to get out, and one of those is to actually punish Iran for breaking part of its commitments to the UN resolution that locked in the deal. So if that's the case, by punishing Iran, if they then are the ones who are blamed for walking away from the deal, that may very well be something that Washington is interested in pursuing. But the catch is, Washington needs to have a plan for when that happens.
Absolutely. Matthew Brodsky, thanks for joining us. Appreciate your insight.
Anytime. Thank you.
Still to come, President Trump refuses to hold back.
You had a group on the other side that came charging in without a permit, and they were very, very violent.
New comments from the president on the deadly violence in Charlottesville this weekend. And Bitcoin is on a roll, the digital currency reaching new highs, while some analysts are saying buyer beware.